A Fox News alert. A new caravan with more than 2,000 migrants is heading towards the southern border. This, as Customs and Border Patrol revealed this fiscal year, has already set the record for the most border encounters. Former Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott on Fox News earlier today addressing the crisis.
I try not to get political, but when people lie to the American public, I take it personally. And when we have documented over 400,000 gotaways, meaning people literally crossed the border and the Border Patrol was able to detect the entry but did not have the resources to respond and interdict them, then how could you say you have border security? And we know these terrorist threats exist. They've existed for years, but never to the extent that I didn't see them to the extent that I did just before I left as chief.
As far as border czar Kamala Harris, when asked if she'd be visiting the border anytime soon, she responded, "I don't have any plans at this moment, no." Instead, the vice president announced plans to travel to France in November. Well, let's hope she finds some good food over there, I guess. David, we've got a clip here of Secretary Jen Psaki and our own Peter Doocy. Let's check that out real quick.
Why did President Biden say he has been to the border?
Well, Peter, as you may have seen, there's been reporting that he did drive through the border when he was on the campaign trail in 2008.
Does that count as a visit? He said, "I've been there before." You're saying he drove by for a few minutes. Does that count?
What is the root cause? Where are people coming from who are coming to the border, Peter?
The president said that
I'm asking you a question because I think people should understand the context.
No, you're
where do people?
I'm asking you if that.
Okay, I'll answer it for you. People come from Central America and Mexico to go to the border. The president has been to those countries 10 times to talk about border issues. There is a focus right now on a photo op. The president does not believe a photo op is the same as solutions.
But he said,
that may be a difference he has with Republicans.
But that's not what he said either. He said, "I guess I should go down." So does he think that he needs a photo op? Is that what he's saying?
He doesn't.
You know, David, number one, thank God for Peter Doocy. We really do need him in there. And, you know he's really doing his job when the press secretary is asking him questions back because she doesn't have an answer for his. But, David, when she calls visiting the border a photo op, how would you respond to that? How do you think Americans that live in these border cities would respond to that?
Well, I'll tell you what, as somebody who's been to this border since the 90s a lot and reported on it, the citizens down there would see it as a photo op the way Biden and Kamala Harris are treating this, because they're not showing up and talking about solutions. And by the way, I'm not saying it's not important for the president, right? You're the leader. You're supposed to be down there. You're supposed to be highlighting this issue. But the contradictions are so clear, Americans are beginning to see it, Joey. They're sending more cabinet secretaries and high-level officials to the climate change summit than they have to the border. They're telling us, or telling people south of the border, don't come to the United States, while they make plans to build 2 new centers, large centers on the southern border to deal with the influx of illegal aliens. And we're talking about gotaways and interdictions. What about what we don't know? And then the national security component of this, the fact that you have Iran and Hezbollah operating in Venezuela in the plains. You have the lawless triangle where Islamists have been operating for decades and down there. And they're also working their way into these mass migrations. It's not just economic migration, it's drugs, it's all kinds of illegal activity, it's human trafficking. So the Democrats are callous. People have to realize they are callous. This makes this a too big to fix problem. And that's really where the Democrats are, or they'd be doing something about it, not canceling contracts.
Yes, it's just another issue that Democrats, I think, are stepping on their own feet and losing the American people. You know, Dr. Sapphire, we know that most of the people probably aren't vaccinated, or we presume as much. The data shows are probably not, that are crossing the border. We know a lot of them aren't getting tested. And even if you took coronavirus out of it, you know, David mentions drugs. What is the public health risk of having an open border and caravans of thousands of people, regardless of their intent? And I'm pro-legal immigration, but what is the public health risk of having these waves of people come across the border from impoverished and countries in the Southern Hemisphere?
Well, Joey, many of the countries that these migrants are coming from have much lower vaccination rates than we do here in the United States. And the escalating surge of migrants coming across the border is making state and city government and non-government officials alike have to deal with their own testing and quarantining of the migrants coming, because the federal government continues to not offer routine testing, quarantining, isolation, and even vaccination. Governor Newsom of California recently gave a $350 million contract to a private company to do their own testing and vaccination of the migrants coming over. Interestingly, he gave this contract to the exact same company that President Trump worked with to build the wall against the border. So when it comes to public health and it comes to migrants, there has always been concern about infectious diseases coming across the border. It's only okay as long as we have the personnel there to test for it and to offer treatment for those who are needing medical treatment. If we're not testing for it, therefore we are not able to help these people. And while Texas and Arizona and California and these other border states are coming down from their Delta waves, it is important that we do not allow people who are COVID positive to come into the communities and it cause another surge of infection. So we have to be testing, we have to be quarantining those who are positive, and we need to be offering vaccinations. And the federal government needs to step up if they're going to allow these migrants to cross the border.
Yeah, you know, I'd imagine if they're bringing drugs across, that's pretty unhealthy, too. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why this is an unhealthy thing for our country. Anita, President Biden, obviously, in his own words this week, said he's too busy to go to the border. He's going overseas and visiting the hurricanes and all these things. But I think we've got a graphic here. He just got a $500,000 security fence around his residence there in Delaware. So I guess, you know, the question to you is, if he has time to go to Delaware so much that he needs this $500,000 security fence built with our taxpayer-funded money, are Americans kind of seeing this hypocrisy?
Yeah, the optics are not good here, right? And I believe that's his summer home, that the Department of Homeland Security, $500,000 federal dollars going to build a fence around his house for protection, but the border doesn't get a wall, right? So why does his summer house get a wall, but the border doesn't? Maybe Peter Doocy can ask about that at the next press conference. And one other question I'd like to ask, does anybody know, is Kamala Harris still the border czar? I mean, is she still? Because we know she went to the border one time, but she's been to Central America, she went to Southeast Asia, and now she's off to Paris. But if you're the border czar, shouldn't you be paying attention to what's going on at the border? Anybody know?
I don't know what the term czar means anymore, other than a made-up title for someone who's not going to do their job. And with that, I think we have a lot of czars that come on Capitol Hill and testify before hearings and just really make the administration look worse. So maybe they need to abandon the term czar for a while and just say people that are going to France and have other things to do. I don't know. But.
From October 1st of this year to now, U.S. Sector Border Patrol agents have already apprehended over 14,000 undocumented immigrants. I spoke with U.S. Sector Border Patrol about the current activity at the border. For the U.S. sector, going from 20 to 30 apprehensions a day in 2020 to now 900 to 1,200 apprehensions a day is extreme.
Our apprehensions are up over 3,000% as opposed to last year. For this year, for this fiscal year, we've surpassed 14,000, and that's just from the first.
Fiscal year 2021, which ended in September, shows that U.S. Border Patrol agents detained more than 1.7 million migrants nationwide, higher than it's ever been. And the numbers hit close to home, too. Over the weekend, there were nearly 2,000 total apprehensions. Monday, there were over 680, and Tuesday, over 700. but the condition of asylum seekers seems to have changed.
We're not seeing the soiled clothes or the torn clothes. They seem to be in pretty good condition once they arrive. We're seeing a lot of, if they do get their shoes dirty, they'll just leave their shoes out there and get another one out of their luggage that they're bringing over. So it's definitely, it seems like a different socioeconomic backgrounds that are coming.
Currently, Brazil, Venezuela, and Cuba are the main 3 countries that asylum seekers are traveling from. And Dulesky says the help they're receiving from other sectors has had a large impact on Yuma holding facilities, as they are no longer over capacity, even with the high number of apprehensions.
Headlines across the country: 1.7 million migrants arrested by Border Patrol along the southwest border in the last fiscal year, which, keep in mind, that ended last month. It is a new record.
For immigration data experts, what matters is the context behind the numbers.
When we look at this 1.7 million number, the top thing that people should know is that that is not the number of people who have been allowed into the United States to seek asylum.
Aaron Reichlin-Melknick works as policy counsel at the American Immigration Council.
The vast majority of that 1.7 million people, 2/3 of them, were expelled, deported, or sent to ICE detention centers.
He says Title 42, the public health policy that allows the government to expel migrants due to COVID-19, led to a high level of repeat crossers. Estimates are 1 in 3 people were caught crossing the border more than once in August.
There are some people who have been documented as crossing unsuccessfully 30 times, trying over and over again and failing each time. That's driven up the apprehension numbers significantly.
There are those in our community who believe there's always been a border crisis.
We have never, ever had a secure border, no matter who the president is, no matter who the Congress is.
Jose Borrajero is a Cuban immigrant, so he says he understands why people are coming. Still,
we have to think about the U.S. citizens and the U.S. legal immigrants first, and then worry about the others.
He hopes change comes soon, especially as the border continues being a top talking point among politicians running for governor in our state.
I have heard some of the interviews and forums and so on, and they're all going to solve the problem. Yeah, we're going to get tough on the border. I've been hearing that for 40 years.
Liliana Soto, ABC 15, Arizona.
U.S. authorities reportedly detaining more than 1.7 million migrants along the Mexico border during the 2021 fiscal year, with arrests by Border Patrol agents soaring to their highest levels ever recorded. Those startling new numbers coming as the Biden administration says it will reinstate the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy that requires some asylum seekers to wait south of the border while their claims to enter the U.S. are heard. The continuing chaos contributing to President Biden's plunging poll numbers, with a new Fox News survey finding that just 35% of voters approve of the job he's doing on border security. We're back with Dan Henninger, Mary Anastasia O'Grady, and Wall Street Journal editorial page writer Jillian Melcher. So, Mary, the president said earlier this year that the surging migrant numbers at the border were seasonal and they would retreat along with the calendar. They haven't. Why not?
Well, Paul, you can draw a straight line from the rhetoric that the Democrats used during the Trump administration on immigration to this problem. There's plenty of interviews with people in that crossing point between Colombia and Panama, other people coming through Mexico who say, now that Biden's in office, the border is going to be open. And so that's one reason they're coming. And then the second reason is when they get to the border, they're being let in. And, those are two huge incentives to act as a magnet to keep bringing more and more people to that border.
Jillian, you've also been down there. When the administration meets these people, these 1.7 million, what's happening to them? Where are they going? Are they staying in the U.S. or going back? What's going on?
Well, some of them are being returned to Mexico, but some of them are being released into the United States, often given an asylum hearing at some future date, but a lot of them end up just never showing up for it. But if you enter the asylum system, basically within a short period of time, you can get permission to stay in the U.S., you can get permission to continue working. And so you see a lot of economic migrants coming here and kind of gaming the asylum system in a way that's really contributing to this crisis. And, going down there and talking to people, what Mary said is absolutely right. You hear people saying, we are here because we hear the Biden administration is more friendly to migrants, and we feel like this is our opportunity to come.
So, I mean, of that 1.7 million, do we have any sense of how many might have been just released into the United States?
The Biden administration hasn't been terribly transparent about this. We know it's a lot. If it's an unaccompanied minor, they will be admitted into the United States, in some cases families, and increasingly adults as well.
Dan, what do you make of this return of the Trump remain in Mexico policy by the administration? It's got to be something of a humiliation because Biden had denounced that plan as a candidate.
Well, it was a result of a decision by a judge who said they had not taken significant consideration of that policy. And so they were more or less forced to return to the return to Mexico policy, which is to say, at least it's a policy. We talk about how Joe Biden is administering the border. Well, Paul, would call it administered anarchy. There is no policy down there other than to open the border the way they have. Joe Biden came into office, basically reversed all of the Trump policies, including the return to Mexico. And as a result, these people have flowed in across the border. And I think the progressives, his rating on this, his approval is down to 35%. The American people, I think, by and large, are shocked that we have no policy whatsoever. But this is the way progressives do politics, Paul. They don't care about that sort of thing. If they get their goals, they're just going to bludgeon the system and allow these people to flow into the United States and just let, it's kind of like sanctuary cities on steroids. And it's hurting Joe Biden himself, but the Democrats behind him don't seem to care. This is their policy.
So, Mary, I may be tilting at windmills, but you and I have followed immigration for a long time. We favor relatively generous immigration. What's the solution here, if you can put it into, summarize it for listeners?
Yeah, it's a push-pull factor. That's the way to look at it. So the pull is what Dan was just describing, this idea that the border is open. That's going to attract a lot of people. And so we have to make it clear they cannot enter the country that way. If they want to enter the country, they have to go to their local consulate and apply for a work visa. And since we have a shortage of labor in this country, if those consulates would issue work visas, we could normalize that migration flow. The second thing would be to work on development. Antony Blinken was in Ecuador last week, and he was telling the countries in South America that they need to to devise policies that will keep people from leaving. And I was thinking, like good energy policies and maybe not focusing on socialism and income equality. But these are none of the policies that the Biden administration recommends to these countries. So, of course, people are desperate. They're coming here.
Yeah, and I would add that let's reform our asylum policy so that people who really do need asylum for political reasons can get it, but others can't abuse that system.
An increasing number of suspected human smugglers are getting caught in the hill country miles and hours away from the border. The rural counties northwest of Bexar County are buckling down on traffic stops.
Yeah, one city is seeing more than 30 times the number of human smuggling cases they typically respond to. That work putting a strain on resources and officers. The Night Team's Patty Santos tells us what solutions these agencies are coming up with.
A rare type of crime for hill country law enforcement.
One vehicle had 27 people in it.
Human smuggling in Junction City, Kimball County.
Literally stacked like logs in the back seat and in the bed of the vehicle.
The police department went from working one human smuggling case in 2020 to 33 this year so far.
When these instances happen, it's all hands on deck.
With only about a dozen law enforcement officers across the county, their vehicles, resources, and manpower is taking a toll.
We had 4 incidents in 1 week.
Over in Kirk County, the sheriff's office facing a similar problem. Investigators say smugglers drawn in on social media by what they see as easy money are using their highways 41, 83, 377, 290, and I-10 to smuggle suspects. In Kirk County, investigators will soon be put to patrol heavy traffic areas.
We're going to be paying more attention to traffic violations. We're going to try to make more contacts with vehicles out on the highway.
Kirk County is also escalating charges for suspects seizing vehicles and devices in hopes of deterring other smugglers.
That we have no air support, we have no state agencies that can help us. Our troopers are being pulled from Kimball County to the border.
Officers are working with limited overtime pay. Without a tax base in Kimball County to hire more officers, Junction City Police is looking to the state.
We've submitted for a couple of drones through Operation Lone Star. We've also submitted for some sort of UTV, ATV to assist us in being able to cover a lot more terrain.
About a half a dozen people have been charged with human smuggling cases in Kirk County since June. And over in Kimball County, they tell us some ranchers have already reported some property damage. John Paul, Myra?
I am fed up.
Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott says the Biden administration's border strategy isn't working.
We don't know who's coming across our border. Mayorkas needs to resign.
Texas Senator John Cornyn says the president not only failed to secure the border, but has taken actions that made the situation worse.
The administration is not enforcing the law. They are engaging or embracing policies that actually actively encourage more illegal immigration.
Cornyn is putting pressure on Congress to pass legislation that would include sending resources to help Border Patrol agents detain and process migrants more quickly.
And the concerns are bipartisan, with some Democrats saying they aren't happy with the way the administration handled the surge of Haitian migrants last month. In a Senate confirmation hearing on Tuesday, New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez asked President Biden's nominee for Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection how he will address future surges.
What will you do in your role as Commissioner to address these operational missteps?
I think we can always do better, perhaps being more prepared, working with other federal agencies, working with state and local agencies.
Menendez says he also wants Congress to address immigration. He says Democrats are pushing for a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants in their budget reconciliation bill. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
The Border Patrol confirms they've detained a record 1.7 million migrants trying to cross the border in the past year. Our Bill Malusian is there at the border where he spends a lot of time with more on why so many are coming. Bill, to you.
Molly, good afternoon to you. We currently have a massive migrant caravan heading our way right now, and it looks like they're not letting anything get in their way. Take a look at this remarkable video just shot a short time ago out of Tapachula, Mexico. Thousands of migrants in that caravan just pushing themselves through a roadblock set up by the Mexican National Guard and Mexican security forces, tossing those Mexican soldiers aside like rag dolls, like a knife through butter, just pushing right through them. Again, thousands of these migrants in this caravan heading north towards the United States. Take a look at this video from earlier this morning when that caravan initially started marching. Again, they are leaving Tapachula, Mexico, down in southeast Mexico. They're currently heading towards Mexico City, where they're going to be grouping up and then heading towards the U.S. Mexico border in an effort to get here into the United States. Reports are this is an extremely well-organized migrant caravan, the leader of which has said the Biden administration is essentially enticing the migrants to come to the United States with their policies. They had banners that said Joe Biden for all. DHS sources have been telling Fox News all week long you can expect upwards of 30,000 migrants to be showing up at the border within the next week or so. So that migrant caravan now on the march, and as you've seen, they're just pushing right past Mexican security forces. Take a look at this third piece of video right here. This is La Jolla, Texas, yesterday, where we are as that caravan is arriving. We're still having migrants show up here every single day. They just walk across the Rio Grande, illegally enter Texas, and then just walk right around the incomplete border wall where we are standing right now. Again, very frustrating for Border Patrol agents out here telling us they need that wall in order to do their job more effectively. We'll send it back to you.
Bill Malusian with some remarkable pictures there and teasing ahead what could be a really remarkable week here on the U.S. border. Thank you, Bill. Griff?
Also, new video coming to us tonight from the U.S sector capturing human smugglers with a young child illegally crossing the border. You can see here one of the men running with a 4-year-old boy on his shoulders, heading toward the silver sedan near County 14th Street. The driver, a convicted felon, took off at a dangerous speed before eventually losing control of the car and swerving into a field. In total, 5 people were taken into custody, 3 migrants and 2 U.S. citizens, including the driver. Agents also found a firearm in the car. The U.S. sector will be presenting this case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Arizona for prosecution.
Is it come as a surprise that Jay Johnson, who was DHS secretary, is finally admitting this?
No, it's not surprising that he's admitting it. What is surprising is now that he says it, all of a sudden outlets like MSNBC are going to say, oh, yeah, it's unsustainable. We've known that. Everybody has known that. You've known that, Leland. You've covered this for an awful long time. But outlets like MSNBC, they've hidden their heads in the sand, pretending like nothing's happening on the border until somebody like Jay Johnson comes out and says it. That's the hypocrisy that we can expect from MSNBC.
It's kind of given them cover in a way to now all go, oh, well, now we have to do something about the border, and Republicans are going to obstruct, which is where the conversation normally goes. Morning America this morning, Adrian Bankart was talking with Senator Rick Scott. Take a listen.
He is not doing his job. His job is to secure the border and keep Americans safe. We've got fentanyl coming all across our border now. We've got people dying because of all this fentanyl. We don't know who's coming across our border. Mayorkas needs to resign.
Talking about Secretary Mayorkas of DHS right now. Brandon, I'm sure you don't like Secretary Mayorkas. You think he should resign too. He's not going to resign. Does Jay Johnson's comments this morning and this sort of realization now that what's happening at the border is a crisis give us any chance of actually having Secretary Mayorkas change course and do something about it and let your Border Patrol agents do something about it?
Not if they continue to call it a humanitarian crisis. I mean, at least they're using the word crisis, but now they're trying to deflect and they're trying to say it's a humanitarian crisis. You can expect that they're going to go back and they're going to start talking about the root causes again, how governments are unstable and climate change and all of this other things. They're going to continue to deflect because they don't want to stop illegal immigration. And that's the main problem. If you don't want to stop it, you're going to continue to invite people across the border illegally, and it's going to continue. I do not see an end to this anytime soon.
Well, that's the scary part. We'll leave it there. Already 1.7 million migrants detained in 2021. That's the fiscal year, 200,000 a month. And we know your agents are overwhelmed, Brandon. We always appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Well, President Biden says there's no time to go to the border as 60,000 more migrants are reportedly gathering in Mexico, where they will soon attempt to enter the U.S. But where do they go when they get here? The New York Post reporting earlier this week that the Biden administration is flying thousands of unaccompanied children all over the country. Here to get into all of that, former Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf. Chad, good to see you. Thank you for coming in. I'm just wondering if we're about to see a replay of what happened in Del Rio, Texas, with all those Haitian immigrants a month ago.
Well, we certainly could be. But let me just start with the president's comments about how he guesses that he should go to the border. Now is not a time to guess. Now is the time for action and leadership. And the president needs to be focused on the border crisis that we have. He needs to go down there. He needs to see it firsthand. He needs to understand it. But we've got, thousands of other migrants coming to the border because the message from this administration is clear that if you come to the border and you get across the border, you turn yourself into Border Patrol, you would be released into the United States. And that's exactly the wrong message we should be sending. And the result is thousands of folks coming to the border, amassing on the Mexican side, waiting to cross at the right time.
Well, has there been any attempt to change policy or to change the strategy of what to do when a wave of immigrants comes in since Del Rio? Because it was just so clear from that one example that we had nothing to stop them from coming.
Well, that's really the essential question is, month after month, you have a historic fiscal year, 1.7 million illegal apprehensions. You have the Del Rio case that you mentioned. When are they going to understand that their strategy is failing? It's failing the American people and it's failing the communities along that border. And they should be out talking about new strategies and new approaches to this. And they're not. Instead, they're talking about the same old root causes that's not going to fix the security at the border.
Well, and we just saw, forgive me for interrupting,
they're not
but
changing course.
We just saw these new figures. They are record-breaking figures. 1.7 million encounters with immigrants in fiscal year 2021. Fiscal year 2021 ends, I believe it's the end of September. So it's the largest number. That 1.7 million is the largest number we've ever had. It ain't working.
Well, it's not working. And the 1.7 are just the total apprehensions that Border Patrol comes into contact with. There's another 400,000 what we call gotaways, folks that Border Patrol never comes into contact with because they don't have the personnel and the resources. So the 1.7 is really closer to 2.1 or 2.2 million individuals trying to come into the country illegally. They need to change course. They have a playbook that works. We handed off a playbook during the transition. They know what works, and they just simply refuse to do it.
And meanwhile, the immigrants who come here, I'm sure the majority of them are seeking a new and better life and plan to get a job and everything. But there are some bad folks mixed in here, too. In fact, ICE, which is supposed to go after those bad folks, is being pulled back by Mayorkas, your successor. And there's no more workplace raids. They're being sort of handcuffed in what they can do. And as a result, we see some horrible instances. In Philadelphia, had this woman raped on a train, which was actually photographed by some of the people on the train by an illegal immigrant, and many other examples across the country.
Well, immigration enforcement is a two-step process, right? It's not only what occurs on the border, but for individuals that come into the interior of the country, we have ICE law enforcement agents that are supposed to enforce the law and remove individuals who are eligible for deportation. And when you have the secretary continue to tell ICE, don't do your job, do not enforce the law, it sends a terrible message. It sends a message not only to the law enforcement officers, but also to the migrants. They are getting the message that if we come across the border, we can stay in the United States, and it's the wrong message.
Yeah, no, that's what the grapevine south of the border says, and there's a lot to it. Chad Wolf, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you coming in.
Right now, as lawlessness engulfs the country of Haiti, tens of thousands of migrants are making the dangerous trek through South and Central America to get to the U.S.
And the mass migration has led to scenes like this one here we saw last month in Texas of huge encampments along the border. The recent wave has also overwhelmed a small beach town in Colombia.
Local 10's Cody Weddle has the one and only exclusive report from Colombia.
The massive arrival of Haitian migrants in this Colombian beach town has transformed the local economy. Vendors here now selling tents, even machetes for the jungle trek ahead. Necoclí, a sleepy touristic beach town, a place Colombian city dwellers come for a few days to relax. But the arrival of up to 20,000 mostly Haitian migrants here has nearly doubled the city's population, even collapsing the local sewer system. But for many here, it also represents an opportunity. Vendors quickly shifting to selling items that the migrants will need in their journey through the jungle.
No se veía.
Vendor Juan Chacon saying this is the first time we've ever seen these items being sold here, but business is good. And many locals like Rosana Vasquez now rent out their Spartan, humble homes for those who can afford to pay.
$5, $6.
They pay us $5 to $6, she says.
Más solidarios con ellos.
Adding, I also believe this is about solidarity. But with Colombian authorities now speculating another wave of Haitian migrants could be passing through soon, the local hospital that only employs a handful of doctors and is attending 50 migrants per day could soon be overwhelmed. General Manager Nader Pupo saying they likely will need more help, a transcontinental problem being felt especially hard on the Colombian coast. From Necoclí, Colombia, I'm Cody Weddle for Local 10 News.
Molly, just like Bill, I've witnessed thousands crossing our border. Take a listen, though, to the former chief.
The current administration has failed to even acknowledge that a crisis exists or to demonstrate any meaningful effort to secure our borders. And contrary to the popular rhetoric right now, it is not an immigration issue. It is a national security threat.
That was former Chief Rodney Scott. at the Senate roundtable earlier this week. He joins us now live from San Diego. Chief Scott, welcome to the program. Thank you for taking time. I thought that was a very important soundbite when you were testifying before some senators this past Wednesday, because as we process this record number, 1.7 million encounters in a fiscal year, and of course this caravan that's on its way, of which I'm going to get on a plane in 4 hours and fly down to, you say this is more than just immigration we should be worried about.
Thank you for having me on this morning, Griff, and thank you for picking that clip, actually. I'm adamant, and the American public needs to understand border security is about national security. It is just like your home. If you can't control who and what is entering your home, you have no security. And I really need to take advantage of this opportunity and correct misstatements being made by the current administration. And I try not to get political, but when people lie to the American public, I take it personally. I heard recently things like the President Biden's been to the border. I surveyed every agent I could get a hold of going back several generations, retired chiefs. No one knows of him ever being there or ever briefing them. But more importantly, the press secretary tried to assert yesterday that this is just economic migrants. That is not true. Go on to cbp.gov, look at the statistics for yourself. There are 400,000 people this last year that were not from Mexico or the Northern Triangle. Those countries included Iraq, Syria, Russia, China, you name it. There was over 150 different nationalities. There were known terrorists that crossed the border. I've made that clear to Congress. I've asked them to ask for more specific information about that because I can't talk about it in this forum. And we haven't even touched on the narcotics. These massive groups of people are being used by the cartel to create gaping holes in the border, and then they're allowing the narcotics and people that don't want to be fingerprinted to get into the U.S. And I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time, but this is a direct result of this administration's policies. You can't stand on the border with a smirk on your face and say the border's closed, the border's secure, we have a plan, and we're acting on that plan, and then basically make that plan be tear down the barriers around the country, and then if you do make it in, let them go. What would happen if you did that at Disneyland or an amusement park?
Chief, such a great point, and you really jogged my interest, because the database, the CBP database, will tell us how many members were in a gang that they apprehended in this fiscal year. It's more than 325. More than 150 of them came from that RGV sector where Bill Melugin is in. But when I asked them yesterday, pointedly, how many have hit the terrorist screening database, they said that is not information they'd give us. But yet when I was in Panama a week ago, the foreign minister down there, Erica Muñoz, says that 52 individuals were associated with terrorists coming through the Darien Gap that they stopped. Is it your opinion that we just don't fully even know how bad our national security risk is?
We leverage a lot of different tools. We work with other countries to try to get the best picture that we can. But when you have documented, not even the unknown, we can't even touch the unknown, but when we have documented over 400,000 gotaways, meaning people literally crossed the border and the Border Patrol was able to detect the entry but did not have the resources to respond and interdict them, then how could you say you have border security? And we know these terrorist threats exist. They've existed for years, but never to the extent that I didn't see them to the extent that I did just before I left as chief. That specific number they claim is law enforcement sensitive. I argued that that is not. It should be transparent. But I can't give that number out right now based on the classification.
Chief, and I wouldn't press you for classified information. Just quickly, in the last 10 seconds we got, Secretary Mayorkas, is this in his lap? What should he do?
He's got a ton of experience. That is a very, very smart guy, and he's making some horrible decisions. If I was the American public, I'd be asking why.
All right. Former Chief Rodney Scott, thank you for taking time. We hope to have you back as we follow this unprecedented migrant surge. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.